Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking to Lee Jussim again. Lee is a professor of psychology at Rutgers University, and he also does work with, and I'm going to screw up the name, the Network Contagion Research Institute. And
Yeah.
I had him on, I'm having him on today to speak about a study that came out late last year about DEI initiatives and training, so diversity and equity and inclusion, which
Yep.
sounds good, but not really. Hey Lee, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah. Well, we don't even need to, go through the studies because that pretty much summarizes it. Oh God.
Yeah, so I mean, okay, look, I read your study, and I mean, there are a couple of things I want to talk about, and but I'll let you go. I'll let you go through the study, but then after that, I might play devil's advocate from the side of a Kendi or a D'Angelo or one of their disciples. Um, like I said, I look, I read your study. I agree with it. I've been saying this kind of stuff for a while, and I think I even sent to you on Twitter or X or whatever that you know, I'm glad you really did the study, and I'm glad, like, I look at some of the people who are on it, like, Pamela Paresky. She's,
Yeah,
I
she's very
really,
good.
yeah. Um, and I'm glad it's done because there's some concrete evidence. There was actually recently something that came out of Canada as well within like the last couple of weeks, same kind of stuff. Um,
Oh,
but
really? I don't know about that. I would like to know about that. So,
I'll send it to you. Um,
yeah.
but there was also, like, my thing was, this was in the news. Some of this stuff was in the news since like 2015. So I keep bringing this up, which was the Dalton Academy in New York City, K through 8 academy, something like $60,000 a year. All right, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It took students from third grade up once a week, for 45 minutes a week. They put them in affinity groups by race, and
Mm,
this was part of their DEI initiatives.
mm.
And kids being kids went online and looked up what's good about my race, what's bad about other races, and these kids turned into like these ethno nationalists.
Yeah,
You
yeah, no, right.
know?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
the school still has racism problems. In 2018 or 19, a bunch of Jewish parents were suing the school because of anti-Semitism. It's still got a huge anti-Semitism problem. And
Yeah.
like I said, I'm really glad that that study came out, but it shouldn't have been needed. Like, I'm sorry, we should like I'll let you like again. I'm going to stop rambling, but we shouldn't be we shouldn't give racism a pass, and that's all this stuff is. I mean, you might go a little bit softer on it, but I'm harsh with this stuff, and I'm like, it's just pure racism.
Well, I mean, the kind of things that you just described with the affinity groups with little kids are like the
Mhm.
exact opposite of what you should be doing if you want to
Mhm.
eliminate racism. You want to be
Mhm.
bringing kids from different groups and backgrounds together
Yeah.
and interacting with each other as if like they're just normal people and their
Mhm.
race or ethnicity and religion doesn't really matter a whole lot for most of the things they're going to do in school. And when they see that alive in the flesh, they tend to become less prejudiced, less racist, and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've known that for decades. It's like
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, enough with my rants here. But so if you want to go into your study, because I mean, like, I really want people, like, I've tried to share it as much as I can. I'd really like, but I want people to kind of understand what you did and how you came to your conclusions. And I don't mean
right.
you
Okay.
personally. I mean, like, I know
Yeah,
you
yeah,
guys
the
are a
group.
group.
Yeah, yeah, because it was a collaborative group on this
Yeah.
paper. So it was actually three studies.
Okay.
Um, we looked at three types of DEI, really rhetoric or pedagogy. So very few DEI programs make their materials publicly available. So we don't know exactly what's going on in many of these programs. Some do make them publicly available. And so one of the things we did sort of a preliminary study and found, among other things, the type of rhetoric used by Robin DiAngelo, who wrote famous White Fragility, and Ibram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. That type of rhetoric privilege and oppression and all that sort of stuff is white supremacy is all over the materials that we had access to. We conducted these three, they're experiments. Each one takes maybe 20, 25 minutes to complete. So it's not like it's a full DEI intervention, which might, involve multiple trainings and, listening sessions, and God knows what the infusion of DEI actually is in any given place. What we did was we took slices of the rhetoric used in these three uh, uh, anti-oppression types of DEI, and then expose people to this rhetoric, versus completely neutral, sort of rhetoric that was completely neutral, had nothing to do with any of this stuff. So, getting concrete, the first study was on anti-racist DEI. The second study was on anti-Islamophobic DEI. And the third study was on the new frontier in DEI, anti-caste oppression. So this is the Hindu caste system.
Mhm.
Does have a history of being oppressive. It's the history is in doing this project, I learned a lot about the history
Mhm.
of caste, which is much richer than the sort of thin oppressive version that I had known about before. But regardless, this isn't about caste in India. This is about caste in the United States. And as far as I can tell, there's very little caste issues in the United States. But among a certain type of social justice activist, caste oppression in the United States is a big deal, and active measures need to be taken to fight it. So we extracted rhetoric. So in the anti-racist study, we extracted rhetoric, the quotes. That is, we used quotes from D'Angelo and Kendi from their books.
Mhm.
We quoted it, and then we kind of patched them together with some of our own writing to make it make sense. So I'm going to just read. It was like, so what people read. So in these experiments, people were exposed. Well, in the first experiment, which was the anti-racist DEI, they were exposed either to this Kendi D'Angelo rhetoric, or, so that was half the people, it's an experiment, so half the people were
Mhm.
assigned to read through that material, and the other half read through an essay on growing corn in the United States.
Mhm.
Yes, you
Okay.
heard that right. Drone core. It's completely neutral. Has nothing to do with any of this stuff. That's the entire point. It's a control essay meant to have them read something that is not going to trigger anything about DEI or race or racism or white supremacy or anything. That's the entire point. It's be completely neutral. So it was either the DEI essay or the corn essay. So the DEI essay was 3 paragraphs. I'm going to read 3 sentences from the shortest of those paragraphs. So
Mhm.
it is very short. And it goes on like this for the other 2 paragraphs, which are longer. White people raised in Western society are conditioned into a white supremacist worldview. Racism is the norm, it is not unusual. As a result, interaction with white people is at times so overwhelming, draining, and incomprehensible that it causes serious anguish for people of color. Went on like that for 2 more paragraphs.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the anti-racism one. In the anti-Islamophobia one, there's an activist anti-Islamophobic organization that has these materials, some of their materials online. We did the same thing. We just quoted from their materials. And in the second study, they got either the anti-Islamophobia essay or they got the corn essay. And then in the anti-caste oppression, there's yet another group that does anti-caste oppression. It's very prominent in this. And so we, again, extracted quotes from their online materials, crafted an anti-caste oppression DEI intervention on the basis of this. And in that one, we did something slightly different with the control essay. So growing corn is completely neutral and far
Mhm.
afield. in the anti-caste oppression, said, okay, well, we've done it with this completely innocuous essay. What if we had them read, be exposed to material about Hindu and Indian history and culture regarding things related to caste? And so one of our collaborators is she's an American. I think she has joint citizenship in India and here, Hindu, and informed us about all these sort of historical norms. So this was an essay about jati and varna and how that related to caste. So caste was actually mentioned, but it talked about in traditional Hindu understanding of these concepts. They are they address the different roles that people have in society, and it goes into how during the British colonial period, the British kind of simplified this or contributed to this simplification or oversimplification of this into what became the caste system, which could be oppressive. So that was kind of the Jati and Varna alternative to the sort of social justice anti-caste oppression. So it's absolutely mentioning all these things. It mentions caste, mentions oppression, but it frames it very differently than the caste oppression. So those are the three studies: anti-racist, anti-Islamophobia, and anti-caste oppression. Okay. So, each case, everybody's given either the DEI type essay or the more neutral essay. In two of the cases, it was corn. In one, it was about this sort of Hindu history and culture. Okay. So, what we then did was, yes. Okay. After having read the essay, they then read everyone in both conditions. This is true for the anti-racism and the anti-caste oppression. It was slightly different in the anti-Islamophobia. They read this. They read a scenario, and the whole scenario is 3 sentences. So I'm not going to read the scenario. A student applied to an elite East Coast university in fall 2024. During the application process, he was interviewed by an admissions officer. Ultimately, the student's application was rejected. That's the whole scenario. Nobody's race is mentioned. It's like students at an elite university, most people are going to be rejected. Our outcome variables were questions like this: how many microaggressions did the applicant experience? How much harm did the applicant experience? How biased was the admissions officer? How fair was the applicant's rejection? Uh, um, and so what we found was that when exposed to the DEI materials, people read these nasty things into the interaction at a much higher level than if they read about corn. So if they got the DEI manipulation, they claimed to have seen more microaggressions, that more harm was committed. They actually rated the interviewer as not statistically significantly, but nonetheless more violent than than when they had the corn essay, and as more unfair. And so that we call this the hostile attribution bias. So there's none of this is in the very brief and sort of information free scenario, but they read it into it. And so yeah, that's DEI leads people to see evil where none existed. That's what we found.
Okay, now on that, so if I'm Kendi or if I'm D'Angelo, they'd be like, I mean, I would say yes. Of course they did, because their books are meant to show you that there's racism everywhere. I mean,
Right.
it's a distillation of the critical consciousness. You want to have that critical consciousness. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I joke around and I say it's the bizarro Ezekiel. So, the story of Ezekiel in the Bible where he pulls back the veil and he sees paradise. Well, these got people pull
I
back the
don't
veil.
know that story, but anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they've done paintings of it as well. Anyways, it's one of the, like I
Right.
said, he pulls back. Or I don't know if it's a dream or if he actually does pull back. Like if he's, I don't know if the Bible says it was a dream or if he actually went and did see it. But that's the
Yeah.
whole thing. And I say these people are the Bizarro Ezekiel because they pull back the veil and they see hell. Whereas Ezekiel saw paradise. I mean, but
Right.
that's all the critical consciousness is, right? Okay, you have to see the reality behind the reality, and you pull it back, and you see all this oppression. I mean,
Right.
uh, so if I
No,
was,
wait. That's fine, kind of, if what you see is actually there. And, in their quasi defense, it is probably true that there are times when things are racist that aren't obvious to most people, because they're just not paying attention to these kind of things. So my guess is most white Americans weren't even aware of redlining in the 1950s and 1960s. Redlining is banks and lending institutions would, sort of draw a red line around areas that they were not going to give loans to. Those were disproportionately black areas. They were defended in ways that, property values weren't as high and, the credit scores weren't as good. But you can make that judgment on an individual basis. You don't need to redline entire areas. My guess is most white people did not know about it when it was happening. I don't know that, but my guess would be that that's true. So they're not completely wrong, but in this particular case, redlining really was a thing. So if you're claiming the banks are discriminating on the basis of race, you don't have to concoct the evidence of discrimination because there really was evidence of discrimination. Whereas in our studies, there was no there.
yeah, I mean, it's the couple examples I use when I try to describe it to people. It's you know, there's a store clerk, and in the store there's a black person and a white person. If the store clerk goes up to the black person first, that's racism because they want to get the black person out of the store. If the store clerk goes up to the white person, that's racism because they don't want to. I mean, so it's a like
Yeah, right.
it's a Kafka
Well,
trap.
yeah, right. Well, yeah, it's a conflict trap. Right, right. Well, right. I mean, if you start with the conclusion and your whole task is to figure out, if the conclusion that everything's racist, and then your whole job is to figure out how it's racist, well, then of course you're going to come up with something to justify the conclusion. I have a blog on my Substack, Unsafe Science, from, I don't know, like 2 or 3 years ago, called "Is Everything Problematic?" where I can show how when you do this kind of thing, dog walking can be considered racist. And even commenting to somebody how beautiful the day is could be construed as racist. So
Yeah,
it's once you get into the swing of doing that, it's really just not that hard.
yeah. But okay, another thing about some of this stuff, and it's just the average everyday person when they hear diversity, equity, and inclusion, or however you want to spell it, um, these sound like good words. So I'll give you an example of a couple of things that have happened up here in Canada. So you had a bunch of school boards across the country doing, affinity group play nights. So Monday would be for black people and Tuesdays for Asians, and then they had a day for white people. Like I'm not saying they excluded them. Now, because it was done under the auspices of DEI and it was called affinity groups, it was applauded. Then a bunch of yahoos in British Columbia. I want to say the name of this that it was Surrey, but I could be wrong about that. But it was somewhere near Vancouver, in the in that general area. They started up a white play group in a park. Now I don't know if this was just fake flyers that were going up or if they were actually doing it. But then everyone was up in arms because this is racism. But I'm like, but you were cheering it when it was going on over there,
Right. Right.
and now
Yeah.
it's racism and it's evil. It's like
Yeah.
it to me, like one of the things about this stuff is the average everyday person who doesn't take the time to and I'm not suggesting people go read. I read far too much critical race theory and intersectionality, and it's nonsense. I'm sorry, like okay, critical race theory, like the critical legal scholarship that led to critical race theory, there's some decent points in there.
Yes, I agree with that
Okay,
actually. Yeah.
but as once it once they put that intersectional lens into it and it became critical race theory and it went crazy. And it's
Yeah. Yeah,
um
yeah, that's right.
and so the people who don't actually take the time to read all that, or you know, I'll post your study and I'll get at least a few comments about how I'm being racist and whatever. Like, like it just, um,
Well, Fox, when our study came out, Fox News did a story on it, but they attempted to contact D'Angelo. She didn't respond, but they did reach Kendi, who described us the study as pseudoscience, described the study as racist pseudoscience. So there you have it.
yeah, and that's coming from Kendi. And then, but that's just it. Like, I've been trying to, and this is look, I'm not saying I'm huge following or anything like, but I'm mainly trying to focus, like, trying to have something I could tell people like in my immediate circles, like, hey, this stuff is wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
I see people bring it up, and it's just, but it's hard. There's so much other bullshit. Like I saw something on LinkedIn the other day. I just happened to be going on there, and um, it was about how DEI actually increases merit.
yes, I've
Yeah,
seen things like that. Yeah,
yeah.
people have argued that. Right.
Um, just curious, when you were looking at some of this stuff, did you? I'm just wondering if you looked at like outcomes of, I know you were doing your studies and you're only looking at these specific things, but I was just wondering in your when you're, I'm assuming you had to do a lot of reading on and stuff like that, which I pity you. But I mean, there was stuff that has come out recently. Like I'll take Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia. I know about it because I know Asra Nomani and I've spoken to her about it because her son was going there. Or you can take Stevenson, like what is it? It's in Bed-Stuy. It's a gifted school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. They went because there were too many Asians in these schools, and they said that's leading to white supremacy, which I don't understand. Um, they got rid of merit-based admissions because they wanted to get rid of the white supremacy. Now, what ended up happening was Asian students went down, black students went down, Latino students went down, white students went up. And you were
Mm.
complaining about when it was actually merit-based, that it was leading to white supremacy. But
Yeah,
when you put in the DEI initiatives, it actually had worse impact on black and brown communities
yeah,
because I mean Asians are now, and I should it depends on what kind of brown because I'm of the brown that's white adjacent now, like Indians and no, but it's true though.
well, it's true in the progressive worldview.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am not sure it's true for anybody else.
yeah. Okay, I mean it's true that
I
they
mean,
would say
it's probably also true. It's true in a different way for actual white supremacists. So, they're a little bit energized by Trump. Usually I think they float around, 6 or 7% of the American population.
yeah,
It might be a little bit higher now. I think there's a little bit of energy there. And they do, there is this kind of weird horseshoe thing, right? So the progressive denunciations America was founded on white supremacy. There's some truth to that. It was founded on lots of other things as well. But on the far right, it's like, yeah, and we need to go back to that. So
yeah, but okay, when you said like it's the percentage of white supremacists is going up, and I'm not going to deny that, but I think it's something I talked to you about before, with you about before. It was there was a study in I want to say Psychology Today, but I could be wrong about that. And this was going back a few years, where white kids were starting to get um, a, a racial consciousness,
yeah, yeah, I
and
think
I'm
that's
like,
right.
well, no shit. You're getting kids to focus on race. You're telling like what I'd mentioned
Right.
about the Dalton Academy. One of the things I didn't say was
Yeah.
they told all the non-white kids that you've been oppressed and it was whitey that oppressed you, and they told all the white kids you're oppressors and evil.
Right.
So that's going to you're getting these kids to start focusing on
Right.
race, and they're getting it over and over and over again. It's like, going you have to go back and see Anthony Robbins over and over again to
Right,
get
right.
pumped up, right? Or you got to keep going to church every week. It's I it's a conditioning. I mean, I before my old Twitter account got banned, um, I'd done a whole thing about conditioning. So I worked overseas. I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and Bosnia, and every time we left the base, we had to get mine awareness training. And you know, I would leave. I worked in IT, so I would be leaving the base on a regular basis, and I got this a lot. And then every 3 months, they just reinforced it for everyone. And I remember I was back in Montreal around, it was a couple of years before I stopped doing this work. So it was around 2010, 2011. My brother was in town, and I happened to be in town at the same time. We went and saw a movie, and we were coming back to my place. It was about 10:30 at night, downtown Montreal. We come up to a bus stop. It's empty. There's no one there. That's not weird because it's late. But there's a box of Pampers sitting at the bus stop.
Mm,
My first thought was, because we were taught to look at our environment, and anything out of the ordinary could be a bomb, could be an IED. So my first thought was, that's an IED,
yeah,
because I was conditioned to see that.
right,
And these kids are being conditioned to see
right,
racism, and everywhere, and they're conditioned to focus on race.
right.
So, you know, yeah, no, I'm not surprised that the level of white supremacy is rising. And I'm not saying
Yeah,
it's,
but I may like I don't know that it's actually rising. I think it's been energized to some degree. I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised if it was rising somewhat. They may simply be more active, which is
yeah,
not quite the same as actually
yeah,
rising in.
well, fine. I mean, but it's more apparent. And like one of
Yeah,
the things I've been talking about since I got back from overseas is we're going to get overcorrections. And we're getting those
yes,
overcorrections now. I mean,
absolutely.
you've got
Right.
like, I know James Lindsay calls them the woke right. I don't like putting, like, the woke left, they call themselves woke. That's why I use woke left. Like, I,
Yeah,
whatever. I mean, I'm not going to argue about labels or whatever, but these people are actually white supremacists,
yeah,
and they're anti Semitic as hell.
yeah.
And that's another thing where you have the horseshoe, which, I mean, I say the horseshoe is now a circle anyways, but you have a lot of anti-Semitism coming from DEI initiatives. You have a lot of
Oh,
anti-Semitism coming from,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
throw in post-colonialism into that, or settler
right,
colonialism, and
right,
it's
right.
full on. I mean, I don't know if you read David Bernstein's book, Woke Anti-Semitism.
Hmm. I think I have it, but I don't think I've read it. I have it as an electronic Kindle version, but I
Yeah,
haven't actually read
yeah. No, I mean, it's a good book, and David goes into a lot of detail. I mean, he's done a lot of work with
it.
left
Yeah,
wing liberal Jewish
yeah, yeah.
organizations, and a lot of them he's fed up with, because of
Right.
you know
Yeah.
them taking this stuff on. But it's okay. Maybe Trump's taking a sledgehammer at everything, but okay. Look, I like what he's done for DEI. I like
Yeah.
what he's done for the trans issue. Like just what he did yesterday, getting men out of women's sports, stopping child transition, like all this
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. I'm on board with that, but I look at what's going on in my country, and I mean, we're full on still. Um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, we're teaching our we're teaching our diplomats and our foreign service. That stupid thing from the Smithsonian white supremacy culture is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
professionalism, punctuality, love of the written word, and that's
Right.
from what's her name, Temu Okam or something like that.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's from the '90s, and they're teaching that to us. Our government also, see, they're saying that's white supremacy culture, and then our immigration department defines white privilege as if you will uphold ideas of white supremacy culture.
So,
Regardless
yeah,
of your
so
skin color or race, you have white privilege.
right.
You
Right.
know,
So if you want people to show up on time, so that there, you're a white supremacist because so what that I was 45 minutes late.
yeah,
Right.
but okay, but it's still
That's
going.
not a micro, that's a macro aggression,
Yeah,
Obade.
yeah. No, but I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with like some of these executive orders from Trump, but education falls underneath the state, and
Yeah.
you still have schools, and they've been doing it. I've been speaking to people about this, and we've been talking about how it's been. starting to get more widespread around 2017. But restorative justice practices, so they don't
Yeah,
punish kids because of black kids um, uh, get more get more detention or whatever.
right,
So kids don't get punished. And again, like it harms the communities that you say you're going to help, and it
right.
you know, and then the other side, it turns people racist. So it's just,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's bad. Yeah, it's bad. It's very bad. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic that Trump's attempts to basically extirpate DEI will be net positive. I am cautiously optimistic about this. I mean, I don't really trust Trump either. Um, but and I definitely don't trust him not to go too far. But on its face, I think that executive order was necessary. Um, I think it's probably already improved the sort of atmosphere in academia, and it remains to be seen what they're actually going to do with it.
yeah. I mean, look, I know you're a professor at Rutgers and whatever, but the more and more I look at it, I'm like, yeah, academia is lost. I just no, and okay, look, and
For yeah, for at least a generation, that's
yeah,
probably right.
but I mean, okay, I know you've been pushing back on this stuff a while. Someone like um, Robert George, like he's like,
Yeah,
he's been pushing back on this a while. Randall Kennedy, I don't agree with everything he's done, but everything he says. But I mean, I don't agree with everything anyone says.
anybody that,
Yeah,
right.
but I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yeah, he's been great.
yeah, and I mean, he did critiques of critical race theory back in the '90s, and he was discounted because he wasn't going along with it. Um,
Yeah,
but and I'm going to mention a couple of people, and you might push back on this. Okay, so just after October 7th in 2023, when these protests first started happening, Nicholas Christakis put out a tweet, something along the lines that goes, "I can't believe that this is going on. I saw for 12 years, I saw kids having, you know, going through these instructions that were racist, and but I didn't think it would lead to this." Okay, I I became aware of Christakis with the whole Yale thing, where the girl yelling at
right.
him and all that. But I started following him and stuff. I respect some of the stuff he's done. I think he's an honest guy. But I mean, I'm blunt and I don't care. And I said, okay, well, what did you do? And he's like,
Yeah,
well, yeah, I've done lots of stuff. And I'm like, okay, what did you write a sternly worded email, or did you help some of those kids file a civil rights suit against the university? I mean, he was the master
right.
of one of the colleges at Yale, Stillman College, right? Isn't he supposed to look after their academic, careers, or sort of coach them? Like he's supposed to help those kids along in that at college. I mean, if you're seeing those kind of abuses, why aren't you doing more than writing a letter? Like it's even Pinker. I know Pinker's had a lot of talks and stuff about it. I I don't like what concrete stuff have you done? Like Charles Nagy. I mean, there's people who are putting themselves on the line, um, got lost their jobs, stood up to it. Um, but the ones and who now want to say, "Oh well, we always stood up to," I'm like, bullshit. I want to call bullshit on that. And you know,
Yeah, I mean, I think this is true for Christakis too. It's definitely true of Pinker. Pinker's been very active in the rise of these academic organizations that are standing for academic freedom. And those organizations are doing good work.
I'm not saying they're not, and I know he is. I'm saying, where were you? You let this shit get so far embedded. You know,
So yeah, okay. So to some extent, I mean, I feel like I've fought pretty hard against it. However,
I'm not talking about you. Like, I look,
no, but
Lee,
I think I'm no, but I'm but within academia, when I'm on committees, search committees, making hiring decisions, what you're up against to some degree is the rest of the faculty. And you can make an argument for this, that, or the other thing, but people have their own issues and agendas. And, it's very, I'm not like, even me personally, I'm not likely to have a drop dead, you and I are probably never going to talk to each other again after this conversation type argument with somebody in my department because I have to live with them, you know? So, so there's that. And then there's also, so consider promotions, academic promotion. The way they work, there's usually a decision within a department. So the department has to say, yes, this person does or does not deserve promotion. And usually, certainly if they say yes, that person then gets evaluated, usually at the dean's level, then at an even higher level. The thing is, when you go up the food chain, people don't really have expertise in the topic. So there's a lot of deference to both the department and the external letter writers. So when you come up for promotion, even in academia, you have to get the equivalent of letters of recommendation from other scholars in the field evaluating your work. Now, usually the department is savvy enough to get letters, mostly from scholars. I mean, if the department supports the candidate, they're going to contact scholars who they believe are likely to support the candidate. So what do you do? So there I am sitting on a dean's level committee, let's say, because this actually happened. And some heavily postmodern social constructionist person comes up. And I think the entire approach is bullshit. That which is true, mostly bullshit anyway. And yet their department supports them. The letters say this person is, does like this great work on this stuff. Could I say no, this is bullshit, and I'm going to use my position to attempt to block anybody who does this kind of work? I couldn't justify it, Obaid. I couldn't justify it to myself. And so, in some sense, that would make me and anyone who else who acted like that complicit in this radical takeover of the
Yeah, I
academy.
guess. I mean, look, I've spoken to you a couple times. I spoke with Jake Mackey. I don't know if he's out in California. I spoke to Yeah, and I spoke to
Oh yeah, no, I know Mackie. Yeah, yeah. You have a
okay.
book. We have a
I
book, an
spoke with a
edited
couple
book
other
together.
people from the California State university system about initiatives that were going on there to push back on this. And Jake and I'm trying to remember the names of the other two. One was Corey Lazar or something like that, and the other one was I forget his first name, Greenslade, I believe. And they were actually saying like, we saw this happening. We didn't want to say anything. We were too scared. I think
Right.
that's part of the problem. I think if you, I don't want people to lose their jobs. I don't want, but at the same point, it got so bad. You had all these groups coming up, like, uh, Moms for Liberty, if you want to take them, Parents Defending Education, uh, you know, okay, with the trans stuff, like Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon when they spoke up about, um, what's the Leah Thomas or whatever her name is or his name is. Yeah, okay. I mean, these
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
who are complete outside. Well, okay, if you can say they were like Gaines and Scanlon were students, but these parents, all these other people, they're complete outsiders. They're not in the academy. They're just seeing what's happening with their kids, and they're getting together. And I'm like, academics have children. Aren't they worried about them? Like 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 I was joking around,
Yeah,
and again, this was a while ago with Jeffrey Miller. Well, I shouldn't even say joking. He's like, oh, why is this happening? And I'm like, sorry, but academics are cowardly. I'm like, they're bookish. Bookish people don't like confrontation, and so they were avoiding it. And it's like,
right.
you know, I don't want to look. I wish we had a functioning academy, and I agree with you when you said it's going to take a generation because this stuff has become embedded in the academy, in our government, and in our slowly into the corporate world. It started in like '97. The long march through the
Yeah,
institutions was basically taking a victory lap,
yeah, that's right.
and
That's right. That's exactly
I,
right.
I just got to give my head a shake. It's like how can Kendi having a PhD devalues yours? No, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, yeah, no, that's right. I mean, what you're touching on is the justified loss of credibility and trust in academia that that
Mhm.
results from the
Yeah.
sort of politicization and lots of other things as well. So,
Okay.
yeah, that is
Loss
absolutely
of
right.
confidence in the academy. I know you've been writing about this for a little bit, but I just wanted to ask you about that. So the replication crisis in psychology, and you've been writing about how your field is going down the tubes.
Yep.
I think I'm being a little bit more blunt than you were, but I mean, do you want to touch on that?
Well, that's a whole set of related but somewhat different sets of issues. So the upshot of the replication crisis, at least so far, is that about half of all attempts to replicate studies in psychology fail. So something is published in a peer-reviewed journal and somebody tries to replicate it. It's kind of a coin flip whether they're going to succeed. If that's all you know, it's sort of a coin flip as to whether they're going to succeed or not. So that's a lot of failed replications. So what it's a weird thing though because of sort of science envy, the social sciences postured as if a publication in psychology or sociology or political science was essentially the same thing as in physics or chemistry. And that's not likely to be true. There's not this, as far as I know, there's imperfections in what gets published and there's fraud and stuff, but there's not this sort of massive replication failures in chemistry and physics that you have in psychology and other social science fields. So that means that the peer reviewed literature should generally have been looked at as communicating about preliminary findings, sort of, in the non-technical sense, experimental research. You do something, you ask some research questions, or you test some hypotheses, you get some results. It's kind of interesting. It needs to be followed up to really know how solid it is. That should have been people's demeanor towards the peer-reviewed literature, but it wasn't. The demeanor of most psychologists was, and I think maybe still is, if I publish it in a peer-reviewed journal, I have now established a new fact. It's a new discovery. And if you criticize, oppose this, you are some sort of science denier. So, which that is not justified given the 50%, sort of run rate of replication success. So it was really the arrogance of thinking that these like tiny little, suboptimal studies that we were running, just because they got published, established some new fact as if, that would hold for all time or something like that. In the same way that a physics discovery would hold for, pretty much all time. Could be overturned, kind of, but
Yeah, I wonder how long physics. Well, maybe physics and chemistry will stand a chance now, but um, you know, Cornell came out with a paper about how light is racist. Um,
uh,
I, you know, there was a professor at McGill University, chemistry professor. I spoke to him, Indian guy. He was doing a research project in chemistry, wanted to hire research assistants, and because he didn't put in a DEI statement in his funding in his grant proposal, he got turned down because he was going to hire up based on merit, not on skin color.
right, right,
You know, and
right.
again, he was told he was a white supremacist. So you're talking about, it's like I know it's not the same as the replication crisis thing, but you're talking about psychology going down the tubes. I mean, I even saw from a couple other people. I think it was Carol Hooven.
Oh yeah.
Okay, like. and I'm trying to think of who else I saw it from, like talking about like putting in DEI in therapy and using that in therapy and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if you know about any of that stuff or if you've looked at it or.
Well, a little bit. I'm actually giving a Zoom talk on the DEI stuff next week to a group called Critical Therapy Antidote, which, that's their whole thing is that, this sort of critical, it's a play on critical theories. It's critical therapy antidote that therapy has been infused with these critical theories. And, people come in with whatever, symptoms or source of unhappiness that they unhappiness or social malfunction or whatever it is that they have, anxiety, depression, and they're being told about their oppression. So, on either side, that either that they're oppressor or they're oppressed. And it's like, you're coming in because something's not working.
Mm.
You're having conflicts with your family, or you're depressed, or you're anxious, you have anxiety attacks, whatever it is. The problem is not oppression. The problem is not that you're oppressing anybody, and the problem is not that you're being oppressed.
Yeah, and okay, the DEI stuff on that, but on the other side, if you go look at, I don't know if they were child psychologists or what kind of therapists or whatever they were, but a girl going in at the start of puberty saying that she's feeling uncomfortable about her body, and a therapist telling her, "Oh, you're trans, so you've got to go on
Right.
puberty blockers." I mean, these people need their license revoked and need to go to prison. Like, like no, but at that extreme, I'm sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
you know, but that's got it. Like, psychology played a big part in the whole in
yeah,
the whole trans social contagion. When
yeah,
you had like a, I'm going to get the number wrong because I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think it was like a 2,000% increase in the number of girls that were transitioning.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and like
yeah.
I was
It's
talking
been
about,
exponential. Yeah, yeah,
uh, and so okay, I'm going to use Sam Harris as an example here. I use him a lot because he talks about this stuff and he's got a big following. Um, oh well, Trump's made people lose trust in the institutions. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, they did that themselves. Trump just pointed
yeah,
it out. And again, it's a lot of people like when you say anything about Trump, it's like, oh, you're a Trump supporter. It's like, no, I think he's a moron. I think he's irrational, and I think he's unpredictable. But he didn't cause the mistrust in the institutions.
right.
Like two things can
Yeah,
be true at the same time.
yeah, right, right. That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know it's getting a little late. But you just recently, I don't know if you were hosting it or if you're one of the organizers, but you went to that conference in California about um, like the censorship.
Censorship of science. I was like sort of a co-organizer.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
What was okay? So yeah, obviously censorship in science, but what was the basic, push of that conference? Like, what were you guys going over? And
Well,
will the videos be released?
well, two of them, the last I looked, I didn't check
Mhm,
today. There's 3 days
mhm,
it had 3 days of talks. The first 2 days are available if you go to the USC Censorship in Science, so you just put
mhm,
a Google search for that, it'll come right up. And as of yesterday morning, 2 days worth were up there. The third day was not up as of yesterday, and I haven't checked today. But it will be. It'll be up there soon. And it's not, what's up there is like the whole day, and it's not time stamped, so it's
mhm.
kind of,
Yeah.
it's not that what's up there is not great for navigation, but you can kind of pull the whatever the time thing
Yeah.
and just see who's speaking and what they're talking about. But it was really, Obed, it was really I mean, there was some sort of anti-woke, anti-DEI
Mhm,
stuff, but there was lots of, although there was some pro stuff also. One of the good things about the conference is there was one speaker in particular who defended DEI statements and the faculty, the appropriateness of faculty just having the power, the authority to decide whether they want to include them or not. I think he was wrong, but I think it was really good to have that talk. And then the editor of Nature, maybe it's Nature Human Behavior, who instituted new ethical guidelines for us for reviewing manuscripts up to and including retracting, including basically reviewer beliefs about whether the research will cause harm So that was, and she defended that. There were probably most people there disagreed with her on that.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, censorship masquerading or, dressed in the, beautiful flowing garbs of, moral goodness. But at the end of the day, it was still censorship. But anyway, it was good to have her there articulating why she believed that that was useful and why she believed it was not censorship. Um, but then there was all sorts of other stuff. There was stuff on like, having nothing to do with politics or ideology or wokeness, and how the academic and sometimes state and federal bureaucracies are major impediments to actually getting research done. There was a whole
Mm,
session on that. So there was a lot. There was, a lot of stuff there, and it was really quite good. Carol Hooven actually spoke there.
mm,
So she was quite good. Jonathan Rauch spoke there, gave sort of a general, overview of his approach to how, you know, I mean, his approach to science is his sort of a subset of his approach to everything, which is
mm,
basically, let people, nobody, some people may have expertise, but and may have some sense authority, but nobody has final say.
yeah,
So any idea can be challenged. It is healthy for it to be challenged. The systems need to be set up to both resolve conflicts, but also to permit the challenges. And
yeah,
I think that's an excellent view of science.
yeah. No, I mean, like, I read, so what? I read Kindly Inquisitors, and I read his one that came out a couple of years ago, The
The Constitution
Constitution
of
of
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah,
I respect his views quite a bit, and I use that a lot. But um, the, the thing with this conference, like, one of the things is what I was speaking about with Jake, and what I was speaking about with those other two professors from California State System, and
yeah.
it was academic. Like, the faculty alone is not going to fix this problem. You're going to need
Right,
some form of legislation, and I think it would be better for the
right,
faculty to work with, even if it's like, you're a Democrat and you're in Florida and it's DeSantis and whatever, work with that government
right,
to mold better legislation
right.
than bitch and moan about it. Like, okay, uh,
Yeah,
Chris Rufo, again, don't, some of the things some of the legislations he's helped push forward, I think were an overreach, and I don't think they were well written.
yep.
But other stuff I think was,
Yes, I
and
agree with both of those.
you know,
Yes,
and like the Stop Woke Act in Florida. Okay, for the K through 12 schools, they're, like, I spoke to Greg Lukianoff about that, and they fall under a different level of
absolutely.
free speech
Right.
than
Yes,
universities. And
right,
okay, the university side of things, I don't care if the University of Florida has a chair in alchemy. What I care about is that chair in alchemy telling the chemistry department how to do chemistry. And it's the same
right,
thing. University of Chicago announced a couple of years ago they're going to have a chair in critical race theory. Fine, have a chair in critical race theory. With that chair in critical race theory, cannot then go to the physics department and say you have to change your hiring practices because you were
right,
being racist, right?
right.
Like, I, I, I think academics have become blinded, like, by the credentials. Like, there's too much weight given to a PhD, and I'm sorry with that young woman, and I don't want to attack her or whatever, but she was very recent. She got an English PhD in
Oh
English
yeah,
about
yeah,
the racism of smell. I mean, all
right.
I've only read the abstract. I haven't read the paper. So, but she used a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
woke terminology, and I'm like, at one point or other, you have to do an audit and say, no, enough's enough. Like, you cannot give out PhDs. No, but you want to teach it, fine, but it can't be accredited, and can't you cannot give out doctorates in this stuff. Like, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, most of the stuff that we're talking about that you just characterize as ludicrous strikes me as sort of academic editorials. They're not research or scholarship in any conventional sense. They're basically editorializing. It's like some person's opinions and analysis of something or other. And it's, I think Peter Boghossian pointed or framed it this way. He described progressives' moral compass has been stuck on oppression.
Yeah. I mean,
And I think that's
I can't remember if it was Batya Ungar Sargon or Monica Osborne who told me this, but one of them was doing a PhD in English, and they said like there's only so many times that someone could write about Macbeth, so they have to go out and find like it's so much everything's being written about so much
right.
that part of the reason you get these stupid things about the racism of smell is that there's nothing left to write about. So maybe stop giving out English PhDs for a while then.
Right.
It's there's something got to be done. Look, like I said, I don't want to keep you too much longer, Lee. It's you've been generous with your
Yeah.
time, but um, any last words on your study or how people can maybe take a different look at DEI and then let people know where they can get a hold of you. And I'll put the links to the study and I'll put the links if you want to send me your Substack. And if I can,
Okay.
I'll put the links to the videos from that conference all in the description.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, look, we studied what are probably the most toxic manifestations of DEI. It's imaginable to me that out there are more benevolent forms of DEI. Now I don't know that there are, but I could imagine it. And it would be useful to find that out. The important thing is for understanding our studies that we really looked at this, when I say toxic, this like oppressed binary, certain groups are
Mm.
oppressor groups, and so then you get this demonization of groups that people respond to as if, okay, yeah, they're demons, all right.
Yeah. When you were saying you don't know about other, okay, I know two people who do. They actually still call it DEI. But one is Chloe Valdery. She does her theory of
Yes.
enchantment, and
Yep.
she says that's a diversity, equity, inclusion thing. But she doesn't use the words to mean the same thing that the and I wish she would use equality instead of equity. But whatever, like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not gonna get into a woke argument about language and police people's language.
yeah,
And the other one is um what's her name? She was from Canada. She's in the state. Irshad, no, yeah, Irshad Manji. She was
Never heard of. I
uh,
know of Chloe Valerie. Actually, I think
uh,
I met her once,
yeah.
but I don't
Uh,
know this other person.
she was I can't remember if she's from India. I believe she's from India. She might be from Pakistan, but she was, a reform Muslim or an ex-Muslim. She was living in Toronto, and she started doing these kind of trainings for corporations that needed to have diversity trainings, but she was getting away from that oppressor oppressed,
Yeah,
okay. And I'm sure there's others, right? But like, I
yeah,
know of those two.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know how widespread or successful any of them have been, but
I
but maybe they have. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think very much so, but you know, it's something to look at, and at least there's an option for something other than, you know, white people bad. I mean, it's
Right,
you know, it,
right.
you know,
Yes, it is possible. So, there's something very interesting in Trump's executive order. He didn't really ban. I mean, he banned federal funding of stuff related to DEI, but um, he also ordered basically an audit of academia's um, DEI practices that constitute illegal discrimination. So in the US, it's illegal to discriminate on the basis of race. I mean, it's illegal to discriminate against black people, but it's because they're black. And it's illegal to discriminate against white people because they're white. I don't think that's true in Canada. In Canada, you're allowed to post an ad that says, white people need not apply.
it's in our Charter of Rights. Affirmative action is in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We are
Yeah.
allowed to just, have positive discrimination for,
Yeah.
quote unquote oppressed classes. Hey, look, we have
Right.
we have two-tiered sentencing. If the judge feels you come from an oppressed class, the judge can then give you a lower sentence.
Or lower. Yeah. Okay. So we don't have anything like that here. The law is the same. Um, but Trump's executive order has this phrase. um, that the upshot, I mean,
Mm,
I can't,
mm,
I don't remember it well enough to
mm.
quote it, but the upshot is that the federal government will be looking to sanction universities that have DEI programs that engage in discrimination.
Again,
Now, what that means is that if you can, any university, any college that has a DI program, all they need to do is argue everything here is fine. There's no discrimination
mm.
here. And, they would have to probably more than just say that. They would probably have to attempt to document it. And I don't really see how, absent sort of some sort of intense federal involvement, and how many cases like this do the feds have resources to conduct at any one time, that it's going to leave most of them intact.
I really wish when Trump's first term, when the president of Princeton put out that stupid letter about how
Okay.
Princeton
Yeah,
is a white
yeah.
supremacist, and they said, okay, we're gonna investigate you, and they dropped it. They should have gone through and made him say, based on
Well,
what are you saying Princeton's a white supremacist hellhole?
that was as I remember, I'm doing this from memory,
Eh,
so maybe this, but I think it was late in Trump's first
Oh
term.
yeah, it was
And
very late.
so he lost the election, and then Biden didn't pursue it.
No, but even before he lost the election, Trump's Department of Education dropped it.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
right? I did not.
yeah, I was following that. Yeah, so it didn't even get to Biden, but
Mm,
they should have at least started the case. And yeah, so if Biden stops it, then the media wouldn't have said anything anyways. But
right, right,
Fox might
right.
have brought it up. But yeah. Anyways, luckily, I like I said, I keep saying I'm in the lecture,
Okay.
so but I keep going
Well,
on.
this
Well,
was great.
yeah. Well, thank
Thank you
you.
for your patience.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much for coming on, and I'll have this out in a couple of days.
That sounds good,
All right.
Obey.
Thanks everyone for
I'll
listening.
see